Welcome to NUNTIUS, your daily AI tech intelligence briefing. Today is August 2nd, 2026. The courts, the markets, and the regulators all made news today, and none of it is quiet. A federal judge handed Anthropic a significant legal win while rebuking the White House. The government missed its own AI framework deadline, leaving the industry to navigate a regulatory vacuum. Goldman Sachs is warning about an AI debt bubble that is already larger than anyone expected. And Google just killed a mobile app that 800,000 people pre-ordered. Let's get into it. Story 1. A federal judge says the Trump administration has no case against Anthropic, and the implications stretch across the entire AI industry. This story has been building since March. Here's the background. The Department of Defense, following a contract dispute with Anthropic, designated the company a supply chain risk under National Security Authority, a label that triggered an executive order from President Trump directing every federal agency to immediately cease all use of Anthropic's technology. Anthropic sued, arguing the designation was retaliation for its refusal to let the Pentagon use Claude for mass surveillance and autonomous lethal targeting decisions. U.S. District Judge Rita Lynn has now made clear, twice, that the government's position is legally precarious. At a hearing this week, she said the administration still has not presented enough evidence to justify the supply chain risk label, and she described the government's argument that Anthropic's public criticism of the DoD justifies a ban as, quote, really troubling. Her concern is structural. If the federal government can punish a contractor for expressing a policy disagreement, that is a First Amendment violation with consequences far beyond this one company. What makes this story significant for the broader industry is not just Anthropic's fate. It is the precedent being set around what federal agencies can and cannot do when AI companies push back on how their technology is used. The line between national security authority and regulatory retaliation is being drawn in real time in federal court right now. Every major AI lab with federal contracts is watching. Story 2. The White House missed its own AI frontier framework deadline, and nobody noticed for almost 24 hours. Executive Order 14409, signed by President Trump earlier this year, required 3 specific AI governance deliverables by August 1st. The first was a classified benchmarking process for frontier AI models, developed jointly by the NSA, CISA, and NIST. The second was a voluntary frontier AI disclosure framework, managed by the Treasury, NSA, CISA, and NIST. The third was a federal cyber workforce expansion plan from the Office of Personnel Management. As of the end of business on August 1st, none of them appeared. No Federal Register notices, no NIST or CISA publications, no statements from the Office of Science and Technology Policy. This matters because of what it leaves behind, a definitional vacuum. Without a clear definition of what constitutes a covered frontier model, the Frontier AI Disclosure Framework cannot be enforced, even voluntarily. Labs building at the frontier must now guess at the regulatory environment they are entering. The delay shifts risk entirely onto builders and is a signal that, despite 2 years of executive orders and task forces, the federal government is still not ready to govern the technology it claims to be overseeing. The irony is sharp. The same week the framework was supposed to launch, 2 of the leading AI safety labs, Anthropic and OpenAI, disclosed separate containment incidents. Governance and reality are moving on separate timelines. Story 3. Goldman Sachs is warning that the AI debt boom is already bigger than anyone predicted, and it is reshaping the bond market. Goldman Sachs strategist Amanda Lynham issued a striking number this week. $489 billion. That is how much AI-related debt has been issued so far in 2026. To put that in context, Goldman's estimate for all of 2025 was $322 billion. We have already blown past the full year 2025 number before August. About 40% of this year's AI debt supply has come directly from hyperscalers. Amazon alone has raised approximately $53 billion in debt, including a $37 billion US bond offering and over $16 billion in euro-denominated bonds. Goldman's own internal estimate is that by 2027, big tech will fund more than a third of its AI infrastructure investments entirely with debt. The market consequence is already visible. AI-related bonds now represent roughly 23% of all U.S. investment-grade issuance and 20% of U.S. high-yield supply. That concentration, combined with the sheer volume, is one of the forces keeping 30-year Treasury yields stubbornly above 5%. Every financial asset on Earth is being priced relative to a risk-free rate that AI infrastructure spending is helping to keep elevated. The uncomfortable question Lynham raises is not whether the debt is serviceable now, it is. The question is what the refinancing environment looks like in 2028 and 2029, when much of this paper matures. If AI revenue has not scaled to match the investment, that is a risk that is still invisible in the earnings reports. It may not stay invisible. Story 4. Google canceled its AI Studio mobile app after 800,000 people pre-ordered it. Google announced this week that it will not ship the standalone AI Studio app for iOS and Android that it unveiled at Google I/O 2026. The reasoning, shared directly on the AI Studio account on X, was candid and slightly remarkable. Rather than asking you to download yet another app, the team decided to pursue an entirely different approach, one where apps emerge naturally in the course of your everyday conversations with Gemini. 800,000 pre-orders gone. Overnight. Google's pivot is strategically defensible. AI Studio is a developer tool for building with Gemini's API, prototyping, prompting, creating applications. Folding that into Gemini rather than shipping a standalone app means reaching a broader audience through the consumer interface people already use, rather than asking developers to adopt another application in an already crowded ecosystem. The partnership with the Gemini team could produce something more powerful than a standalone app would have been. But the cancellation is also another data point in the Google AI narrative. This is a company that has shipped and killed products at a rate that erodes developer trust over time. 800,000 people signaled genuine interest in a product for building AI applications. What Google will need to demonstrate now is that the Gemini integration delivers on the promise those pre-orders represented, and that it does so faster than a standalone app would have. Story 5. China's AI funding race is accelerating toward IPOs, and the numbers are staggering. Chinese venture capital was at a 3-year low coming into 2026. Then DeepSeek and Moonshot happened. Now, limited partners are redirecting capital back into domestic tech, AI, and robotics at a rate that is changing the global funding landscape. DeepSeek, the Chinese AI lab that sent shockwaves through global markets when it released its open source model in January, raised $7.4 billion in its first external funding round in June, led by Tencent and CATL at a valuation exceeding $50 billion. This week, DeepSeek is reportedly seeking fresh capital at a valuation as high as $71 billion, ahead of a planned IPO on Shanghai's Star Market, targeting the second quarter of 2027. Moonshot AI, the Beijing startup behind the Kimi AI assistant, has tripled its valuation in 6 months. After raising $700 million in January at a $10 billion valuation, it closed a $3.5 billion round this year at $35 billion. A Hong Kong listing is expected within 6 months. What this tells you is that the competitive AI race is not a US story. It is a global story with a particularly well-capitalized Chinese front. US export controls on advanced chips have slowed but not stopped Chinese frontier AI development. The capital is flowing. The IPO pipeline is filling. The assumption that US AI labs have a multi-year structural lead deserves scrutiny. Story 6. Apple just became the first major tech vendor to rate limit AI-generated bug reports. And it is a signal of a broader industry reckoning. Apple has introduced a submission cap and a 30-day cool-off period for Feedback Assistant, the platform developers and users use to report bugs to Apple. The reason? An overwhelming volume of AI-generated bug submissions is degrading the signal quality of the system. Researchers can apply for higher quotas, but the default throttle is now in place. This is a small story with a large implication. AI-assisted vulnerability disclosure is now a standard workflow for security researchers. Tools that can analyze code bases, generate test cases, and draft bug reports make individual researchers dramatically more productive. But productivity at scale becomes noise at scale. And the platforms receiving those reports cannot always distinguish a high-quality AI-assisted finding from a low-quality AI-generated submission. Apple is the first major vendor to formally address this with policy. Similar throttles have appeared at curl, at the Internet Bug Bounty, and at other open source projects. Expect more. The bug bounty and vulnerability disclosure ecosystem is about to go through the same reckoning that every information-dense professional workflow is facing. When AI lowers the cost of generating output, the value of that output shifts to whoever can most credibly signal quality. In security research, getting that signal wrong has consequences. That is NUNTIUS for August 2nd, 2026. 6 stories, all of them pointing at the same underlying reality. Artificial intelligence is not a technology story anymore. It is a legal story, a regulatory story, a capital markets story, a geopolitical story, and it moves every single day. Subscribe so you do not miss it. We will be back tomorrow.